What's up? This is Super Mike 2164. We're going to try this again. I did this last night, but the sound was messed up, so I erased it. And like I said, what I want to do is we're just going to basically do a reading of Dr. Wesley's the Pot Plot book. And basically, that's what's going to happen. And it's inspired because a lot of us don't understand there's a war because the enemy, the reason why they can't stand you so much, the reason why they hate you, it was literally a formal war declared on Black folks in America. Yep. So we're gonna keep that. It's just gonna be a broadcast, but it's gonna be an important broadcast. I encourage you to look up some of the stuff that's told to you and share this message. Press the like, press the share. All right, so let me show. Let me turn some of this down. I'm just going to get into this. And I'm going to do it this way so you guys can see the book. This is the book that I'll be reading. Right here. Let's have the music is there. We'll have it like that. So this is the plot. Marijuana Hip Hop Scientific Assault on Black America by Dr. Wesley, PhD. Keep in mind, this is a scholarly work. This work is researched and footnoted. You'll be able to research these things to verify this stuff. This book was written by a bona fide PhD, but he's a real one. So let's go through his table of contents real quick just so we can see this here. All right, so we got the testosterone conspiracy and estrogen assault. Keep in mind, all weapons are not only guns, bombs, stuff like that, tanks, missiles. Okay, they have chemical weapons. Okay, they have biological weapons. So this is part one. The government declares war on Black masculinity. We will read that today. Testosterone, the power hormone. This is the reason why we need to understand science. The Black man from Mr. T, Mr. Testosterone, to Mr. E, Mr. Estrogen. If Black masculinity is, he had a print error there. His Black masculinity is the disease. Black feminization is the cure. White male fragility and the assault on Black masculinity. Prison experiments and homosexuality project. This is stuff that we're living is the result of. Nixon's war. President Nixon's war on Black America. Scientifically taming the Black bull. Nixon's war on Black masculinity. Scientific genocide. The warning. This is part 3. Scientific assault, weaponizing the air we breathe. Waging war by zip code. I did some of that earlier on this page. Waging war by zip code, weaponizing the food that we eat. Black America's prostate cancer epidemic and testosterone conspiracy. The toxic assault against the Black woman and child. So women are not out of this. This is a war on us as a people, as a Black culture. The pot plot. Newport's an early ethnic weapon, masculinizing Black women. The woman king stuff. See, this is the stages of this stuff. This man's going to document all of this stuff. Where this stuff is coming from. Cannabis and the ancient cult of the white feminine. Militarized marijuana. How loud was first created. The neural endocrinology of weaponized weed. How weaponized weed feminizes the black male and masculinizes the black female. This is stuff. A lot of this stuff may go over some people's head because we don't know science a little bit or familiar with it, but we can learn it. We research. Part 5: the weaponization of hip hop. Okay, black music as a province of Jewish art. Why weaponize hip hop? The Farrakhan factor. The neuroscience of music, the militarization of music, the queering of hip hop, the gay mafia and hip hop, the mollification of hip hop, how to kill a god, the murder of Michael Jackson. That's the final chapter. And we're going to get right into this here. So, the testosterone conspiracy and the estrogen assault. This is part 1. Chapter 1. The government declares war on black masculinity. This is just a reading, guys. Make sure you press the like, press the share, and study some of this stuff. The government declares war on black masculinity. This is the motive. Depending on what defining criteria are used, there were between 750 and 820 urban rebellions or riots across hundreds of U.S. cities in the 8 years between 1964 and 1971, and approximately 1,000 over the course of the decade, 1960 and 1971, according to some reports, resulting in at least 228 deaths, 12,741 people injured, 69,099 arrests, with 15,835 incidents of arson. In 1967-1968 were the zenith years, with more than 160 disorders occurring in 128 cities in the years, in the first 9 months of 1967 alone. This convulsive wave of mob violence, with black ghettos exploding in a cataclysmic frustration and rage, was trivialized. Okay, so he made light of, made fun of it by a number of white sociologists, such as the influential Seymour Spillerman. I have a picture of this guy. Hold on a second here. Seymour Spillerman. This guy. So, what did he say? And this is what he said, as instances of substantial racial violence rooted in Negro aggression, and that's in this book. Negro aggression is a key phrase here that will take on greater significance as we proceed. The Detroit Rebellion in the summer of 1967 was one of the biggest urban rebellions in the history of the United States. Over 5 days in July, 43 persons died, 33 African Americans and 10 whites. 1,200 were injured, more than 7,000 were arrested, and estimated $50 million in property damage was caused. Governor George Romney, Mitt Romney's father, see, this is the Detroit riots. Got a picture of that. Governor George Romney ordered the Michigan Army National Guard in, and at first, President Johnson refused to send the federal troops due to the stipulation of the Insurrection Act of 1807, restricting the government from deploying military troops within the U.S. until state or local authorities declared a state of insurrection in their area. This Governor Romney did And on July 24th, President Johnson sent in the 82nd and the 101st Airborne Division, which meant the people of Detroit were to be considered a rebelling enemy force. So that is when they declared war on the black folks. Right there. July 24th, 1967. That's when you were officially declared as an enemy force to America. Since then, that's what they've been doing. Those riots in Detroit and all over the country. So the 17,000 officers and military personnel that occupied the streets thus gave the appearance that the city was a war zone, which it literally was after July 24th. The Detroit Rebellion was a cultural hinge point after which nothing was the same, according to Michael Hodges of the Detroit News. Its significance was not restricted to the city, even to the U.S., but had global implications, according to the University of Washington Bothell professor Scott Kurashich. The Detroit uprising marked a dramatic turn in the battle over alternative futures, and it was central to an overall pattern of social rebellions and anti-colonial revolts and global uprisings of the oppressed in 1967-1968. Emphasis added, Wesley Muhammad. As we shall see below, the U.S. government also recognized what was really going on in its cities, the apparent beginning of a revolution. Somehow, this cataclysmic convulsion abruptly fizzled out during the Nixon administration, never to truly percolate or erupt until 1992. The period of 1964 and 1971 was a period of widespread urban rioting that is unique in U.S. history. The nation has experienced a small number of large-scale urban riots since 1971, such as Miami in 1980 and Los Angeles in 1992. But there has been no repeat of the riots of the 1960s. How was this fizzling out affected? The subsequent Nixon administration chief domestic policy, it appears, was actively pursuing and quieting of this cataclysmic frustration and rage, but not only by urban reconstruction or but not by urban reconstruction or economic relief for the poor, rather through intense covert war on Black America. A war directed particularly against Black males' body, mind, and masculinity, a carceral and chemical war. The government prepares for revolution and war. Detroit, in particular, compelled President Johnson to respond to the rebellions in two ways that are critical, in addition to treating it legally as an insurrection. And we'll just look at this here. So they responded to it in two ways, including, in addition to treating it legally as an insurrection. First way they responded to it, President Johnson established, let's look at this part. President Johnson established a National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders and to investigate the cause of the riots. President Johnson put attorney David Ginsburg, former counsel to the Jewish Agency in Washington, in charge as executive director. On November 22nd, 1967, the first draft of the commission's report was delivered to Ginsburg by Robert Shallow, the commission's deputy director of research, entitled The Harvest of American Racism. See, this is the Harvest Report. The Harvest of American Racism. The political meaning of violence in America, in the summer of 1967. The first draft was blistering. The 120 social scientists who worked on the report collected data damning to Johnson's Great Society programs, tokens that the report said failed to tamper with the white power structure enough to have a real impact. It was not Negro aggression that lay at the root of the riots, but white racism reinforced by white power structure. The 176-page report observed a truly revolutionary spirit had begun to take hold, an unwillingness to compromise or wait any longer to risk death rather than have their people continue in subordinate status. Emphasis added. Revolution, even violent revolution, was in the air among the Black people in 1967, and the careful observers saw it. The Harvest likened the urban rebels to colonial revolutionaries of America's early beginnings in a provocative chapter entitled America on the Brink. The white racism and Black rebellion, the authors argue that the whites must change. The draft concluded that these revolutionary uprisings could only be dealt with via a major investment and transformation of the Black communities. But this damning indictment of President Johnson, the Great Society, and American white supremacy never saw the light of day, except as a battered manuscript that managed to escape the destruction that was ordered for it and now grows dusty in the presidential library. And that's the Johnson's Presidential Library in Austin, Texas. So you can see this thing, but you got to go get it from them. So that's where he got it from, and that's his source for that statement. So this is a battered manuscript, so they actually still have the original there. So the battered manuscript managed to escape the destruction that was ordered for it and grows dusty in the presidential library. When Ginsburg and his deputy, Victor Palmieri, read the draft report, the former, Ginsburg, lost his cool and cursed, screaming and screamed, while the latter threw the manuscript against the wall. After all, Deputy Executive Director Palmieri had described the process of the commission staff recruitment as a war strategy. War was the underlying objective, not relief for the inner cities. Do we understand that statement? You see, this is a war strategy. Keep in mind, you were declared in July 24 of 1967 as an enemy combatant. The troops, the 82nd Airborne, the 101st Airborne, were sent to get you. They ain't playing no more. You are an enemy force to be dealt with. And that's the underlying objective, not relief for the inner cities. So now we're thinking about Mississippi, we're thinking about Flint and all these other cities. So they're not trying to relieve y'all. Thus, what happened next was predictable. The executive staff of lawyers concluded that a new report would need to be written. Ginsburg fired all 120 social scientists who had worked on the draft. Fired too was Shallow, who happened to have been an assistant director of research at the National Institute of Health. That later can come up significant. According to one researcher, the White House sent an appointee to the commission with instructions to rework harvest into an acceptable form. The acceptable report released on February 29th, 1968, and now known as the official Kerner report, is much milder than the harvest in its language and indictments, but is still hard-hitting enough in its analysis to provoke anger by President Johnson and even backlash by President Nixon vis-a his conclusion with Attorney General John Mitchell to railroad and set up for prosecution and conviction Otto Kerner, who chaired the commission. Because the controversial findings of the report ultimately blamed white racism and economic inequality for producing the conditions that provoked the riots. And keep in mind, if you look at the debate between Cynthia G and Umar Johnson, Cynthia claims that black men did absolutely nothing to change the situation. Umar referenced the Kerner report, which admits from the social sciences and government that this stuff is introduced. So, this is what the Kerner report is. The report ultimately blamed white racism, which, we know this, but they officially agreed. White racism and economic inequality for producing the conditions that provoked the riots. The riots involved mostly young black men who were acting against oppressive white society, authority, and property. The report argued, unless the prevailing conditions were corrected, large-scale and continuing violence could result. Okay, followed by white retaliation. This prediction of continuing violence from young black males of America's cities was taken to heart. Now, that was the first thing they did to get you. It's the first thing they did. The second thing they did, the same month that the Kerner report was published, February 1968, a government blueprint for suppressing domestic civil disturbances, a counterinsurgency plan was officially constituted as the federal contingency plan for handling the revolution seen coming. The Department of Defense Civil Disturbance Plan 55-2, codenamed Operation Garden Plot, was a joint Justice Department Pentagon, Justice Department, this is why you getting put in jail all the time, and Pentagon, which is a war room program for the imposition of martial law in the event of civil disorders. The principal components of Operation Garden Plot were the following: 25,000 specially trained airborne troops stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and Fort Bragg, North Carolina. This war room was fitted with detailed blueprints for military occupants of every prominent U.S. city that had experienced urban unrest or was profiled as a potential center of justice of such disorders. The U.S. Department's Interdepartmental Intelligence Unit, IDIU, was established as a massive computer dossier bank drawing in profile information on millions of American citizens, gleaned from every federal and state agency maintaining computerized records. The IDIU conception was not to build a static bank of dirty laundry, but to maintain an ongoing tracking capability. Sounds like Facebook, YouTube, internet, social media. On on the basis of the tracking, and as one feature of Garden Plot, a list was compiled by the Justice Department under the name ADEX of individuals targeted for immediate detention at the first activation of civil disorders. Corollary training programs for civil and local and state police officials were conducted in every region of the country to bring local government agencies directly into the Garden Plot umbrella and to facilitate the transition from civilian to martial law. We're living in martial law now. They just smoothly did it over years. See, that's why our police look like military soldiers now. These training programs were also designed as profiling and recruiting vehicles for establishing networks in every major city through which to implement counterinsurgency policies against the local population. The Nixon administration will inherit Operation Garden Plot and make use of it in the war that is waged on Black America. So that's all that I'll read today. Next time we'll go into pathologizing and criminalizing Black masculinity, Project Ferdinand. All right. So that's the portion of the book. Make sure you go back, listen to it, research some of this stuff. Familiarize yourself with the urban rebellions of between 1960 and 1971, which culminated after they killed Dr. King, who did nothing but try to tell these people the truth. This man just tried to tell these people the truth. But here they go. They just wanted to kill him. This is where this came from. And this is why we're living in the situation that we're living in right now. So peace out. What's up, BMT?